Hi, I'm Rove McManus and welcome to a new season of Australian Story. Tonight's episode is about a good friend of mine, cricketing legend Glenn McGrath. Glenn and I both know what it's like to lose a loved one to breast cancer. When Glenn lost his first wife, Jane, 13 years ago, he devoted himself to the foundation they had started, which aims to provide free breast care nurses to patients across Australia. And as tonight's story shows, honouring Jane's legacy has truly become a family affair.
I've never been a person that lives in the past, nor have I really been someone that lives in the future. I've been very much in the now, and I think that's helped me in a lot of ways.
So you want me to memorise it?
We might be here all afternoon.
Yeah.
Sure, bad things are going to happen, and there's been some bloody tough things in my life, without a doubt.
Hey there.
Everyone has their own battles and challenges to face. Everyone's got their own story, and it's how you pick yourself up and carry on.
G'day there, Glenn McGrath here. Last year, we were all part of something special, a pink test truly like no other before it.
Get your virtual seat, put your name on it, it'll go perfectly with your real seat.
Yeah, you ready? Looking up this way. Awesome. That's the way.
Jane said to me, do you fancy starting a charity trace? And I said, okay, what are we doing? She said, we're going to raise funds for breast care nurses because she knew how tough it was going through breast cancer without a breast care nurse. One of the promises that I did make to Jane when I sat holding her hand just before she passed was that no matter what, the children will never forget her, because that was one of the things that she was scared of.
I don't remember much about my mum. I was pretty young, but I think that makes me kind of cherish the memories that I do have a bit more.
The pink silk that gets stretched out into the field every year. You know, it just sort of brings back old memories and seeing her face again, that sort of thing.
I really do see the foundation as a way of keeping my mum's memory and her legacy and what she wanted to do alive.
When I met Glenn, he very quickly told me that he was a widower and that he had 2 kids. It was his story. I mean, people are who they are with the story that they have.
Sara's 100% behind the McGrath Foundation. You know, if she's part of this life, she can't get away from it, and she's embraced it.
Did I understand Jane's legacy? Certainly not from afar, but after, being here, I understand why Australia had so much respect and love for her. And I always thought, if I passed away, how would I want somebody to take care of my kids?
And going through with Jane what we went through, you realise what we worry about on a normal, everyday basis is not important. But what is important is the people in our lives.
This is where I first played when I moved to Sydney. It's still Carringbar Oval to me. When my elder 2 kids were younger, it was Daddy Oval. I think if you ask James or Holly, they wouldn't call it Daddy Oval anymore.
All right.
How you going?
Yeah, good. How was work?
Oh, yeah, not too bad. How's your day?
Oh, I can't complain.
Yeah. I've always known about it. That is sort of a big deal in the cricket world. It's always been around.
You're allowed to hit it if you can.
Okay. The McGrath last name is not really a burden on me. Like, people expect you to bowl well, don't expect much on the batting side.
In the history of Australian quick bowlers, he's definitely up there. In our era, he was the best.
Whatever was going on off the field, however tough that was for him, he could always switch it on. He'd come onto the field and bang, he was away.
And he was always a guy that was up for the battle, and doing well, being the best bowler in the world was his #1 focus.
I look back at it, sometimes have to pinch myself to think that I actually played cricket for Australia. What an incredible journey that would have been. I think, well, actually, I lived it.
Glenn McGrath is the most exciting fast bowler we've had in years.
Excellent bowling from Glenn McGrath.
And his story, like him, comes straight from the bush. At school in Narromine, he hardly played cricket, but later he was blessed with every kid's dream. He was spotted by legend Doug Walters.
Rumour has it that Dougie thought I had a little bit of potential, and within the next few months I got the call up, did I want to move to Sydney and give cricket a go? I didn't really know anyone in Sydney, so my mum and I decided we'd buy a caravan in Dubbo, tow that to Sydney, that's where I'm going to live.
The first 13 months was quite lonely, and I look back on that time and I guess it was nearly a test of character to stick at it and just stick down here and get through things.
We heard about this country kid who was pretty quick from Narromine, and he was tall, skinny, and his pants weren't long enough. They're up above his ankles. So I thought this guy's definitely doesn't know what's going on, but as soon as he bowled, you knew he had something special.
Larkin takes the edge and he's gone in the very first over.
Nicknamed Millard after the caravan, he lived in solitary simplicity and only for cricket. He sped into first grade and then the Australian Test squad.
When it actually happened really quickly, and I just enjoyed it. And that was as simple as that.
Yeah, he's got a nasty mean streak in him, which is handy for a quick bowler, and he hasn't got many brains, which also can be handy for him as well. So yeah, he's a pretty good package, actually, for a quick bowler.
Listen, you've got to be. You should be careful. That's right. He's saying lovely.
I've been giving you raps.
I'm used to it, mate. I'm used to it.
I've been giving you a rap, mate.
Glenn had a lot of things in his favour. First of all, he was very tall, which gave the ball a lot of bounce. He had a nice, easy run-up and a lovely action.
He's gone!
He was somebody that Mark Taylor, Steve Waugh, Ricky Ponting could always go to get Australia out of a tight situation because he could absorb pressure.
It's gone this time. That's beautiful bowling.
With cricket, you want consistency, ball after ball after ball, and be able to do that. And that was something that I found that I could do. I don't know, I think I just played for the right reasons. I just played because I loved it.
It was just his relentless pressure, his consistency. And he was a great thinker on the game too. He always outsmarted the batsman.
My goal was to play what I classed the perfect game, where every single ball went exactly where I wanted it to. I could never understand setting a field for a bad delivery. I just thought, what's the point of bowling a bad delivery?
It takes a bit of getting used to playing for Australia. All of a sudden, sort of plucked out of obscurity. You're representing your country in front of big crowds and huge expectations. He came of age, I think, in the West Indies when he had to lead the attack.
On the West Indies tour '95, the game plan was to go short at the opposition, fast bowlers. I went on to get man of the match. And it was the first time, I think, since I made the Australian team that I really felt I contributed to a win.
I thought Glenn bowled magnificently all test. He bowled as quick as anyone in the game and really put his hand up and really came of age today in this test match.
When I came back from the West Indies, I was 6'5", 6'6", and weighed 77 kilos. So there was nothing of me. And I thought, if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm not going to have any longevity in the game. So I went out and found a trainer, a guy called Kev Chevelle. And one of the first questions he asked was, what are you prepared to do? And I said, whatever it takes.
I said, well, that's the right answer. I'll see you out at Penrith on next Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. Don't be late. And he turned up at 5:45 and never missed a session for the next 12 years.
And his attitude was not to train me for cricket, but to train me to be unbreakable. I used to look forward to the season starting to have a rest. To go and play a test match in India in 45 degrees was having a rest or having a break. It was after the West Indies tour, I got invited to go and play in the Hong Kong Sixers for an Australian team. Went to a nightclub called Joe Bananas and met Jane there.
Jane worked for Virgin Atlantic and she was on a stopover in Hong Kong. I used to ask, how did she become Jane McGrath when Brendan Julian was with Glenn on the same night? And I'm saying to her, what was she thinking? And she said, don't be like that, Trace. I love him. I'm like, yeah, but there's Brendan Julian and there's Glenn McGrath.
We got on well and stayed in contact, and then she moved out to Australia probably 12 months later.
Glenn and Jane together seemed a perfect match. They seemed to have had that instant bond, and they enjoyed each other's company. That was very evident from day one.
When you and Glenn were first together, even though he was Australia's greatest and one of the world's greatest fast bowlers, you had no idea, did you?
No. We went to a friend of his having a barbecue, and the girl said to me, so, Jane, what's it like going out with Glenn McGrath? And I said, what's it like going out with your boyfriend? She goes, yeah, but Jane, Glenn's a superstar. And I was just dumbstruck. And I said, what do you mean a superstar? Jane, Glenn's as famous as Robert De Niro. Which he's never let me forget.
I met Jane because I was married to Michael Bevan, Australian cricketer.
Jane and Tracy connected very early because they were English and both had Australian cricket husbands, so they really got on well.
We were on a tour in 1997, an Ashes tour, and we were in a hotel in Canterbury, and I had a knock at the door, and Jane was just stood there with a towel wrapped round her. And she went, "Give me your hand, doll." And she took my hand and she placed it on her breast, and it was like I had the wind taken out of me. And because I could feel like what I personally described as like a frozen pea lump on her breast.
We came home. Jane made an appointment with the doctor to go and get it looked at. And that's when everything sort of turned upside down for us. The doctor didn't muck around. He said, "You've got breast cancer. The only treatment is mastectomy, followed by chemo, followed by radiotherapy."
The doctor had told her that she might not be able to conceive, to have a baby, but she didn't care what people said, because to her, she was going to be a mother, and she was going to do everything that she could within her power to have a baby.
So we waited 12 months to allow the chemo to get out of the system, and I think Jane fell pregnant straight away, and James was born in January 2000, and then Holly was born in September 2001.
It meant the world to Jane to have James and Holly, and she'd say to me that was her reason for fighting breast cancer. She'd say, "It's not just about me or Glenn anymore, it's about my babies."
Holly wants to go over and look at the river. Do you want to go and do that?
They were very happy, getting on with life. Everything was going sweetly. Of course, anybody that's been in an experience like that will always have something in the back of their mind that reminds them that possibly, it may return at some point.
Can you see any more duckies?
They say sort of 5 years. If you can make 5 years, that's a great sign. So we got to, it's about 6 years. And again, it was after a tour. I'd been away in South Africa for the World Cup in '03. We won that World Cup.
Their second World Cup in a row.
And again, on a bit of a high, came home. Jane had been complaining for a while about pain in her hip.
I was cooking dinner and the phone rang, and it was Jane. And all she said to me was, "It's back."
I remember landing in the UK, getting the phone call, and just everything turned to shit, basically, and I had to then get back on a plane and come back home and then sort of deal with what was happening then. I would have preferred to have stayed at home, but the most important thing to Jane at that time was for our life to get back to as normal as possible.
Jane just wants a bit of normality back in her life, and for that is me playing cricket, and so she's keen for me to get back into it.
So I went back and joined the team for the last few test matches of that tour. It was a tough time for me, without a doubt.
When West Indian batsman Ramnaresh Sarwan mentioned Glenn McGrath's wife, who's recovering from cancer, the champion fast bowler made it clear he believes Sarwan had crossed the line.
I said something, he came back and said, "Why don't you ask your wife?" And then because what Jane had been going through, that hit a nerve, and it all blew up from there.
Shouting, screaming and pointing of fingers.
Sort of blew up more than it should have, and probably caused a few problems for everyone, including the captain. But that was life. I mean, he was going through a tough time.
Umpire David Shepherd now comes up to have a word with Sarwan.
That was one of those times where I'd take full responsibility, and it was funny, Sarwan and I didn't really know each other, but we got on better after that than we did beforehand, so it's funny how things turn out. The one positive out of going through with Jane, what we went through, was there was a breast care nurse there. When Jane had the first diagnosed back in '97, there wasn't a breast care nurse available, and so we had to go through the whole experience by ourselves. This time, having Alison there, she was there to come along to appointments, to answer any questions you had, to put your mind at ease. She knew what was coming up next.
Hey. Hey, how are you? Really good to see you again.
Good to see you.
I first met Jane when she was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. When breast cancer metastasises, it means that it has spread elsewhere in the body.
And she knew that it metastasised, so one day breast cancer would take her life, because once it was in her bones, she couldn't get rid of it.
What we're achieving is because of you, really.
I'm just amazed at how much it's grown over the years.
Alison really was the genesis of why Jane wanted the foundation to be about nurses. When you get a breast cancer diagnosis, it's like being hit by a storm. And that nurse really helps to educate, create an environment of calm. Essentially, they're their voice, they're their advocate.
Having Alison there, Jane looked at her as an angel, guardian angel.
It's so important that you have someone that knows what they're talking about and has been down this road before. And they're there basically to hold your hand every step of the way.
It allowed Jane, when she was at home, to be herself.
This is a new toy, isn't it?
It gave her identity or herself back when she was at home. She could be a mum, she could be a friend, she could be a wife. And I think in that instance, that's probably one of the most incredible gifts you can give someone at that time.
To kick things off, Glenn's going to open up with a few comments.
And I think everything that had happened off the field had an impact. You know, kids were growing up and I was spending a lot of time away from them. Everything Jane was going through as well, and I just thought it was time to retire.
It's only really been the last probably few games that I've really thought about it and come up with the decision of finally hanging the boots up. So played my last test match for Australia here at the SCG. That was my sort of locker down there to the left. I was interviewed that day and they said, if you could have one thing out of today, what would it be? And I said, if I could take a wicket on my last ball in Test cricket, I'd be pretty happy. And I remember the last morning, we had them 9 down. I was bowling from the Randwick end. Warney was bowling from the Paddington end here. And I was lucky enough to get the wicket, the last wicket. You know, bowled a slower ball to Jimmy Anderson from around the wicket. And he clipped it straight up in the air, and Mike Hussey fielding over there at mid-on just takes an easy catch.
Glenn McGrath takes the final wicket with his final ball in Test match cricket.
And I got to walk off holding the ball, you know, to the crowd, you know, Warney with me.
I thought he got it right. I think we both got it right at the right time. I think there's a few sportsmen out there probably just hang on a bit too long. I think it's better to always go out on top.
This will be a lap of honour to remember.
I remember walking around the SCG and I've got James and Holly in my arms. We're waving to the crowd and it was an incredible feeling.
One person is moving, is standing, is seeing a wonderful moment in the history of Australian cricket.
I think the reception he got from the crowd was fitting. Australians loved him because he was the average person. He was one of them. I think a lot of people could see themselves in him and the way he behaved, so they felt they were on the journey with him.
Those are some of the most memorable scenes that we'll ever see.
So I retired, and then, you know, unfortunately, Jane's health went downhill after that, or very quickly after that, and then the rest is sort of history. We were told that because it had metastasised, it's just something you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. I never considered that Jane could lose the battle. And everything was going well. You know, she was great. I went off to play in the first Indian Premier League.
And she called me and she said, and would I come and stay with her until Glenn got back? What I didn't know was that we were spending the last days together.
Trace found Jane on the bathroom floor, and then just everything turned upside down from there. I got the call that Jane's in a bad way, and so I got on a flight and came straight home. James was 8, Holly was 6, and I remember probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do was tell them that their mum was going to die, and so I told them, and within probably 2 days' time, she passed away. And I think that wasn't as hard for me as telling the kids.
When Jane passed, Glenn and I made promises to each other that we'll always be involved at the McGrath Foundation, regardless of what happens, and that we would always keep the foundation true to what Jane wanted when she started it.
Hey, Jamie. How you going, mate? You good? Good to see you in pink, mate. Excellent.
So after Jane passed away, the next test match was at the SCG. Cricket Australia came to us and said, we want to honour Jane's memory and change Ladies' Day, which is day 3, to Jane McGrath Day for this test match. I think they might have thought it would be just a one-off.
Yes, and there's the silk and that wonderful image of Jane.
We got to day 3, Jane McGrath Day, and to see the ground, a sea of pink, it was quite magical.
And then we realised something pretty incredible's been achieved here, and then each year it's just got bigger and better.
And I think as much as it's probably an emotional day for him and his family, I think he still sits there in the middle of the Sydney Cricket Ground and feels pretty proud of what he's been able to achieve. And I think all of us as his friends and ex-teammates, we're pretty proud of him too.
When Jane passed away, I thought, how could I ever meet someone again? How can I fall in love again? How could I get married again? I just thought there's just no way.
It was kind of like when I moved out here, it was just, you just have to have faith in the universe that it's going to work out.
So a year after Jane passed, Glenn was in South Africa playing cricket, and that's where he met Sara.
I'd never even been to Australia, so follow your heart and you just know. When you know, you know. Did you know?
Apparently. Yes, honey. Straight away.
Glenn and I met at a party in Cape Town where I'd been living for 3 years. I remember asking him, like, oh, what do you do? And he's like, oh, I play cricket. And I was like, oh, no, I mean, like, how do you pay your mortgage? And he said, no, I play cricket. And I was like, oh, okay. And then my friends at the party explained, like, what cricket was. I think it wasn't until we were actually dating that I realized, I guess, how influential he was in the game.
Yeah, because what is it? It's coming up to 13 years that we met.
Oh, yeah.
God. How lucky have you been for the last 13 years?
I know.
Sara grew up between Miami and Sicily. Her father's Italian, born in Sicily. Her mother's Italian, but born in Venezuela.
Would you like some
See how much better that looks? Does some also go here, no?
I just enjoyed being with her. She's fun, she's exciting, she's got all these ideas and never wants to sit still, plenty of energy. And we just connected, just hit it off.
Do I sit with you? Obviously.
Yeah, with Sara, I love her completely, as I love Jane.
Well, I know you're going to have all the girls here.
Oh, so
yeah, Jane's a little bit bachelor.
Oh my gosh.
When you make the decision to be with someone, you take the whole package. You can't compartmentalize people's lives.
Oh, nice.
What about a doll?
What a doll, what are you having?
And I knew exactly what I was getting myself into. I have situations of blended family with loss in my own family. So I had no illusions that things were going to be peachy-peachy, but I knew that Glenn and I loved each other and we were going to make it work.
It would have been a lot of pressure. Jane was so popular with the public, and I think people maybe thought that she came in quickly, but yeah, she handled herself extremely well.
It must have been really difficult for Sara. But what I know Sara brought to the family was fun. Because there hadn't been much fun in the McGrath family for a long time.
And the kids were beautiful when I came. You know, I think in the back of my mind, I might have thought a million things, but when I first met James and Holly, like literally got out of the car from the airport, the kids hugged me. So it was nice.
I already have some.
They got more.
You want to give me more?
I can't even imagine what it would be like to come into a relationship knowing that you're taking on the man, but also 2 kids as well. I think that takes a lot of kind of strength and courage to be able to take that on and then to do such a good job at it as well.
I witnessed something. So James had hurt himself and he came in and he was crying and I was there, Glenn was there, but the person he went to and threw his arms around was Sara. And I knew right then in that moment, she's doing a great job.
Oh, and then the movers came for the 3rd time today and packed everything.
She's been great. She's really stepped up in our family incredibly. You know, like she's taken myself and Holly in and looked after us like we're our own children.
Good catch. I thought I'd never meet someone again. And the other thing I was never doing again was having any more children. I had a vasectomy a few years after Holly was born, so it wasn't going to happen accidentally.
Was kind of like, look, if we're going to have a child, biologically ours, it's now or never. And we knew we had to go through IVF and all of that.
I know that Sara had a very difficult pregnancy and had to have a cesarean. I think it was about 7-8 weeks before Madison, was due. And I know that was really difficult.
So she had preeclampsia. She was swelling up. She could hardly breathe. Her lungs were filling with fluid. And the doctor came to us and he said, "We need to deliver your baby now because your wife will not be alive in 6 hours." And I thought, shit, here we go again.
But in the midst of all of that, we tried to find a little bit of humor, even though the situation was not funny at all. I said to him, if I'm gone, like, you're absolutely undateable. Like, who's gonna date you if I'm gone?
When Madison first arrived, she was a tiny little thing and we all took turns holding her in the hospital room, and it was a surreal experience, and to see and like watch her grow up, it's been amazing.
What size Jaguar do you have right now? She's just a little ball of energy, and I can't imagine not having her around as a younger sibling. Like, I would do anything for her. I didn't think that we could kind of get closer as a family, but she's managed to help us do that.
After you.
Hello.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Hey, James, how are you?
Good, thanks,
Oh,
sir.
it's so good to see you.
You too?
Hello, lovely. Hi.
One of the biggest things for Jane was that the kids would forget her being so young. And I made that promise that they wouldn't. But what also helps me keep that promise to Jane and the children, keep her legacy alive, is the McGrath Foundation.
Right. Here we go.
James and Holly have been involved their entire lives. I think for me what's lovely to see now that they're adults is they're beginning to get more involved. So for the first time this year they attended the AGM because they are members of the organisation.
Good to go? Yep. Oh, thanks for coming in.
For James and Holly, it's very special. How could it not be?
I think it's a tough year for all charities and foundations, but coming up with the idea for the pink test with the virtual seats was huge.
It was really interesting to kind of see what it took to kind of run the foundation.
Onto the financial reports.
They've lived as long as the foundation has in many ways, and it has grown with them, and I hope that that connection will be there for the rest of their lives.
Oh, there you go. Welcome.
There you go. I don't think there's too many people in Australia that haven't been touched by breast cancer in some way, shape or form.
Karen, how are you?
Jane and I decided to tell our story, originally hoping to help one person. We had 4 McGrath breast care nurses employed when Jane passed away. As I sit here now, we have 171 nurses. They've supported more than 100,000 families and individuals going through breast cancer, and hearing those numbers just blows me away.
We want to get to 250 nurses, and we have set ourselves an ambitious target to get there by 2025 in order to make sure that everybody has a nurse for free, no matter where they live.
Once we had Alison, our breast care nurse, she answered all Jane's questions. She was there at every treatment. She knew what was coming up next. Just put her mind at rest. And so we realised how incredible these nurses are, and that's why we do what we do.
Glenn's extremely generous and has been from day one, and very involved. He gives of his time entirely freely. It's completely pro bono.
As well as he's done in the cricket, as well as he's done with his children and everything, I think that the McGrath Foundation is a legacy that'll live on for a long, long time.
That's never been about me. Jane never wanted it to be about her. She wanted it to be about our nurses, and it's about, the people going through it. If tomorrow they found a cure and there was no reason to have the McGrath Foundation, that would be the happiest day in my life.
It's his story. He lived it. Nobody lived it like Jane and Glenn did. It's the legacy of Jane. It's like it will be the legacy of Glenn. It will be the legacy of James, of Holly, and of Madison as well. So it is a privilege to be involved with the foundation.
It's gone! Yes, that's well bowled. That's 200 test wickets.
I don't view myself any differently now than when I grew up in the country. I think, fair enough, I was lucky enough to do the things I did, but that's just what I did.
Gone! Glenn McGrath, there's 300.
I think I've always been happy with who I am as a person, and I've always just tried to go out there and do my best.
In the air, out. That's 500 for McGrath. Wonderful cricketer. Brilliant bowling.
I had a favourite saying, or I still a favourite saying, by a guy called Mark Twain. He said, 20 years from now, you'll have more regrets from the things you didn't do than from the things you did. And I think that's how we should live our life.
I learned how to bat when I'm retired.